The shadow of empire stretched long across the Italian peninsula, a dominion built on legions, law, and an unshakable belief in Roman destiny. This was the late Roman Republic, a time when the foundations of that grandeur began to show deep, unsettling fissures. Before we continue, please like and subscribe. Beneath the veneer of ordered governance, ambition simmered, and internal contradictions began to boil over like an unquenchable fever. The Republic, once a vibrant, competitive entity, was increasingly consumed by the very forces it sought to control, a struggle between tradition and radical change. The Senate, once the supreme voice of Roman authority, found its power increasingly contested by the powerful generals who commanded the loyalty of the legions. The very structure of Roman society was under immense strain. Wealth became concentrated in the hands of a few, while the common people faced mounting economic hardship. This disparity fueled a deep resentment that was expertly exploited by ambitious men seeking to reshape the political landscape. The traditional values and the established legal framework began to fray as the demands of an expanding, restless empire clashed with the realities of governing such a vast and diverse territory. Into this volatile atmosphere stepped figures whose personal ambition eclipsed the public good. These were men whose focus shifted from defending the Republic to securing their own dominance. They were men who understood that the true power lay not just in holding the Senate, but in controlling the armies that enforced its will. Legions, once instruments of the state, began to become instruments of personal desire, their loyalty shifting from the abstract concept of Rome to the tangible promises of their commanders. The political machinations of the era were a deadly dance of alliances, betrayals, and open conflict. Powerful individuals maneuvered within the city, using rhetoric and carefully orchestrated public displays to sway the fickle opinions of the Roman populace and the shifting allegiances of the military. These were not merely political debates. They were rehearsals for war, where diplomacy was a thin veil over brutal, inevitable confrontation. Seeds of catastrophe were sown through a series of escalating conflicts, each one a trial by fire that revealed the brutal realities of Roman power. These engagements tested the limits of Roman resolve and exposed the fatal flaws in its military and political systems. The methods of warfare evolved, becoming less about strategic maneuvering and more about sheer, overwhelming force and the ruthless application of will. The ensuing struggles were not isolated events. They were interconnected threads weaving a tapestry of decline. As internal political divisions deepened, external pressures mounted, and the internal mechanisms designed to maintain order began to break down under the strain of unsustainable demands. The very concept of the Republic, designed for a city-state, proved inadequate for managing an empire of such staggering scale. Turning point arrived with a confrontation that irrevocably altered the trajectory of Roman history. It was a battle where the fate of the Republic hung precariously in the balance, a clash that signaled the irreversible shift from a governing republic to an autocratic empire. The lines drawn in this pivotal engagement were not just lines on a battlefield. They were the demarcation between two fundamentally different ways of organizing human civilization. Consequences of this devastating engagement were profound and long-lasting. The internal cohesion of the Roman state shattered, replaced by a fractured landscape of competing power centers. The traditional civic virtues that had once defined Roman identity were eclipsed by the ruthless pragmatism of military dominance. The established legal and political structures, once thought eternal, proved brittle when faced with existential military threats and internal ambition. The empire that emerged from this crucible was a transformation, a heavy, complex edifice built upon the ruins of the old republic. It was a system defined by centralized authority and military might, a structure that would define the subsequent centuries of Western civilization. The battle that destroyed the Republic was more than a simple military defeat. It was the violent birth of an age defined by imperial ambition, setting the course for the world that followed. This transition marked the death knell of an era, a moment where the abstract ideals of Roman liberty were brutally superseded by the concrete realities of imperial control. The shift was not a gentle evolution, but a violent rupture, a seismic event that rearranged the very geography of power in the Mediterranean. From the ashes of that conflict emerged an empire defined by expansion, assimilation, and an iron will that demanded obedience across an immense and variegated landscape. The concept of Roman law, once the bedrock of a complex legal system, was reinterpreted not as a mechanism for civic balance, but as a tool for the efficient administration and subjugation of conquered peoples. Provincial governance became a matter of imperial decree, where local customs and traditions were either suppressed or selectively incorporated to serve the greater needs of the central authority. Roads were built, not merely for trade, but to facilitate the swift movement of legions and tax revenues, binding the disparate corners of the world into a single, exploitable entity. The focus shifted from the internal political struggles within the city walls to the external management of an ever-growing frontier. Governors, once administrators of a city-state, became agents of the emperor, tasked with ensuring tax collection, maintaining order, and stamping the Roman presence upon lands that had never known Roman rule. The machinery of the state, once focused on internal civic life, was repurposed into an engine of imperial expansion, a relentless mechanism designed to extract resources and project power outward. This new reality demanded a new kind of authority, one that was less reliant on the fluctuating consensus of the Senate and more rooted in the immutable, terrifying force of the military. The very identity of Rome transformed from a political experiment into a monolithic, divinely sanctioned reality, an edifice built on conquest and cemented by the unyielding authority of the legions. The shadow of the Republic receded, replaced by the colossal, often brutal, shadow of the Empire, a dominion that would shape the course of history for millennia to come. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more.